recently, actually, on John Pinar's programme, I sort of announced that reluctantly I've come to the conclusion that Rishi Sunak will need to be replaced as Tory leader before the election, because he can't do politics, in my view. And this immigration pledge fee is really an illustration of that. Why on earth, a year or more ago, did he promise to stop, not reduce the number of boats, but stop the boats swiftly, when it really wasn't in his power to deliver that? And there's so many other examples, really, where I think the Prime Minister's a good man. I think he's in politics for the right reasons of public service, but he hasn't been a minister long enough. He hasn't got that basic experience of government. He hasn't got that political compass, that political nous to do things properly and realistically. And I'm afraid the whole immigration pledge is an example of that. And even if the Rwanda bill passes, we're never going to put as many people on a plane, probably in any single day, as come across the channel in the other way on a boat.
Yeah, and that is a huge problem, actually, isn't it, Tim? And we've talked about this a bit on the programme before, that actually the optics of a plane going to Rwanda may well have seemed absolutely fantastic when the plan was first okayed. But if there are only 150 people on that plane, if there's any kind of, legal wrangle going on for just one of those people that has to be taken off a plane, the optics are actually nightmarish, aren't they?
Absolutely nightmarish. And look, and there is something, I know not everyone who's listening to this programme will agree with what I'm about to say, but a lot of British voters, particularly conservative inclined voters, see the small boats issue as particularly offensive. They think almost people are breaking into the country illegally. But putting that aside, the vast majority of immigration is legal. And the government could with a stroke of the pen, reduce the amount of legal immigration. I think we should be proud as a country that we've accepted migrants from almost asylum seekers, really, from Ukraine and Afghanistan and Hong Kong. But so many people we still bring in to do work that probably, if we invested in British local workers, could be done by British local workers. But it's an easy shortcut to import labour rather than train up our own people. And that's the real Tory failure. It isn't stopping the boats. It's skilling our own workforce so that they can do the jobs that we rely on immigrants to do.
As you've just said, you have already told Times Radio and the world that you believe that Rishi Sunak isn't really the man for the job. But I wonder what your thoughts are about how a more nimble leader would currently be dealing with immigration. Would a more nimble leader simply have ditched Rwanda?
Yes, I think that's what he should have done when he became Prime Minister. He's taken a number of other brave decisions, I think, when he's been Prime Minister. I think it's notable, for example, that you haven't heard Keir Starmer say he would restart the HS2 project. The HS2 project was, I think, a very noble ambition, but it clearly ran way over budget. And Rishi Sunak was right to cut our losses and say that money could be better spent on infrastructure across the north, for daily commuting, for a start. And if you're willing to stop a project as big as HS2, it's a shame he didn't stop a project like the Rwanda scheme, which really is just a scheme. I think Rishi Sunak's fundamental failure is, I follow politics incredibly closely. I don't really know what he wants to do if the Conservatives won another parliament, the unlikely event of it happening. Does he really want to build houses? Does he want to switch from university education to more of a vocational education emphasis to help sort of blue collar workers? I don't know what he would do with power in the unlikely event that the British people gave the Conservatives another term in office.
Do you know what? That's a really interesting point to make, because actually we have all got stuck on the pledges, haven't we? And it would be very, very difficult. And I know, perhaps this happens after a manifesto is written and the election date is finally announced, but it would be difficult to move away from those pledges and talk about anything else, because it would allow people to say, you failed at those pledges, mate.
Absolutely. And look, I don't know. I was a very excited Conservative in 2019 when we won a majority of 80.
You're always an excited Conservative, Tim.
More excited sometimes than others. But I thought with a majority of 80, we could really use the time to tackle some of the fundamental problems facing our country. And probably if I had to list the 1, 2, and 3 problems, it would be housing, housing, housing. We should have built houses for a young generation that feel completely squeezed at the moment. We could have done it. We may not have a Conservative majority of this kind again for many parliaments. We may never have another Conservative majority ever if the Conservative Party continues to behave as it has done. And if I'd been Prime Minister in the unlikely weird event that I was Prime Minister, I know what I would have done with a majority of 80. And Rishi Sunak just has wasted it, unfortunately. And yeah, that doesn't get me excited at all.
Okay, but do you think that he does deserve some credit for his handling of the economy? So if you were just to look at the facts, inflation has gone from just over 11% in October 2022 to 3.4% in February 2024. I know that critics would be able to immediately leap in and say that's about other factors. But actually, if that was one of his pledges, which it was, he's absolutely aced that.
Well, look, it's mainly, I think, if you look around the world, most Western countries saw inflation rise, and most Western countries have brought inflation back down to the kind of level we've had. And most of the hard work in that has been done by interest rates and therefore central banks like the Bank of England. Yes, Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, they didn't give in to public sector pay demands, which could have frustrated that decline in inflation. So they didn't do nothing, but I think even that pledge, they didn't do the lion's share of the work. And
the problem as well is that people just don't feel better off yet at all, do they? No. So if Jeremy Hunt says the government is on track to meet both its debt and borrowing fiscal rules, with underlying debt falling as a share of GDP to 92.9% in 2028 to 2029, people are just like,
numbers more than I am. Yeah, no,
but people will just go, that's just words. You know, it's just a kind of word and numbers soup in a sentence. Yeah. I'm not feeling better off, mate.
Yeah, and look, there's a season, as the Bible says, there's a season for everything. And I think I'm old enough to remember the 92 to 97 Conservative government, which ended in the Blair landslide. And the economy then was motoring. You know, the economy was growing very fast under a Conservative government. Ken Clarke was then Chancellor. But it didn't really do the Conservatives much good, because I think once that was, the end of a period of 18 years of Conservative government. Once I think an electorate has decided you've had your time, we gave you the benefit of the doubt on X, Y, and Z at the beginning, but we just want something different now. And I think that's where voters are. I think the Conservatives need to do a lot more to paint a cost to Labour. I don't understand what Labour are going to do. They're always complaining about public sector spending cuts, but they don't seem to have any agenda at all to put that right, in my view. They're certainly not willing, to be honest, to think about taxes. So the Tories still can do stuff to minimise the defeat, to ensure that the Conservatives have a credible opposition, to ensure that Labour's held to account. They can't win, though, I don't think. And my aim in wanting a different Prime Minister before the election is just to give us a sort of a shot at being competitive. I know it's not going to transform the situation.
We should talk about the environment as well. And I mean, I think it's quite telling, actually, that when we asked you onto the programme to talk about taking the temperature of the Conservative Party, we have put the environment underneath the economy and talking about immigration. And I wonder whether you think that history will judge this Conservative government very badly, perhaps on many things, but not least, or not really rising to the huge challenge of climate emergency and being able to sell it in a way to the people, to us, as something that we can be part of, we can be optimistic about if we get it right now.
Well, I think just the way you frame the question is just an illustration, really, I think, of how badly the Conservatives have failed, because you're right. Fundamentally, we have communicated recently that we're rowing back on our environmental targets. In fact, we've actually just adjusted them very slightly. If you look at Britain's overall record on climate change in particular over these last 14 years, it's been very good. There's very few, I think only one, I think we're second or third in international tables about advanced economies reducing their carbon footprint. And that's all happens under a Conservative-led government. And I think what Rishi Sunak did was he He made some of the timetables, for example, on petrol cars and boilers more realistic. But we'll still be sort of on par with all of the European Union countries, for example. We're just no longer going to be faster than them. So I think the Conservatives can be proud of what we've done on the environment. But the political communications issue, again, we now look like we haven't believed in what we're doing, and then voters don't give you credit for it. So it's good policy, but bad politics, if I'm making sense.
You are making sense, Tim. You always make sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this
Thank you.
afternoon. We'll let you get back to your bank holiday. You can get back to thinking about cling film. Don't think about it too much. Tim Montgomerie from Conservative Homes.